Okay, welcome to the Arborist call. Kind of same format as always, welcome meeting intro. These are occurring every 2 weeks now, for those that might not know. We the research and implementation status updates, we kind of loosely agreed to have those as needed, as opposed to taking 20 minutes out of every call to just kind of do an update. But absolutely, if there's anything anyone would like to cover Zcash D or ZebraD, we can absolutely just work that in as needed. Deirdre, anything in particular you wanted to update on? I don't really have anything on the Zcash D side today.
One thing of note is we just merged in our async batch validation of the Groth16 proofs for sapling for spend and output descriptions. So now you can sync and validate all of those with checkpointing in about 3 hours. And the CPU graphs for mainnet from Genesis to tip of mainnet. The CPU graphs are very fun because it's chugging along with some good CPU, and then it gets to the end of the checkpoints and there's like a big spike where it's batch validating everything from the activation of Canopy to the end of the mainnet tip, and then it goes all the way down to like 2% or 4% as it just keeps up with tip, and it works and it's really fast. So if you want to try it, it's on the main branch of ZebraD. That's a big one. So yeah.
Are you also batch verifying signatures?
We are for Red Jub.
Okay. All right.
And we're merging in, like today, batch verification of Ed 25519 signatures. We're batch verifying spend auths because I have a bug in my binding key derivation logic. So that we're not verifying the bindings yet, but we are verifying the spend auths.
Okay.
Can you turn up your volume of your microphone, Deirdre?
Better?
Yes, perfect, thanks.
Oh, sorry. I have someone else in my background, so I turned it down a little bit.
And if you like using tag releases, those changes will all be in a release in about a week or two.
Yep.
So they'll all be in the next release.
Excellent. All right, very good. Yeah, nothing in particular on the Zcash D side. We're obviously right in the middle of implementations for NU5. And in the middle of the specification audit with NCC, had our first, just a tiny update there, had our first kind of midpoint sync with them. Good feedback. They found a couple things in the spec, grammatical things that didn't quite match the spec to the zips, etc. But pretty trivial. So that's going along pretty well, I'd say.
There will be a new version of the spec tonight.
Mm-hmm. All right, so yeah, that was the main thing. So in terms of discussions today, we wanted to introduce something called Unified Addresses. It's actually in the spec, I think, Dara, in like section 5.4 something, roughly, somewhere in there.
I can't remember the section, but let me see. It is in section 5.6 or
5.6. Okay, I was close.
Or 5641 to be more precise.
Okay, I knew there was a 5 and a 4 in there, but anyway, yeah. So we wanted to talk a little bit about that, and then just kind of the typical wrap up. So, and then anything else, time permitting, that people wanted to catch up on would be great. Little pause for the intro. Arborist calls are bi-weekly calls where we talk about protocol related things in development, implementation of new features, and any kind of blockers and unresolved issues. The goal is just to make protocol development more accessible for more participants in the ecosystem and provide transparency to what's going on in Zcash at the protocol level. Anybody can participate at all. If there's participate on a given call, or if there's something that you'd like to talk about and present that's relevant to protocol development, you can ping us on any of the Discord, the R&D Discord that Hudson set up, or you can just email me directly at steven@electriccoin.co, and we'll absolutely get you slotted in to chat. So we try to keep these fairly open and laid back, so feel free to hop in at any point if anyone's interested. So okay, so unified addresses, wanted to kind of introduce this. I don't guess by chance Nate hasn't made it yet, right? And I can't see all the participants. So I'm going to take that as a no. So he was supposed to present this, so you're stuck with me until he gets here. But we've got a whole team that knows more about it than I do, so we'll get going at any rate. So what are unified addresses? They're a proposed UX standardized feature to improve ecosystem integration, usability, and privacy adoption. I didn't include it in the slide, but they actually came out of a thing we did a little over a month ago now, I believe, called a design sprint. It's modeled after Google's design sprints, where we kind of dedicate a week for the most part, get rid of any non-essential meetings, and just kind of work through UX. We're doing this with the wallet team. Work through like UX issues, primarily a lot of blue sky. What can we do better? You know, nothing is off the table in some terms of potential new features. So out of that design sprint, what we kind of went in there with was talking about a few things. Obviously with Orchard, there's a new pool, new address. We had kind of envisioned it being, you know, Z01 asterisk type thing. So the design sprint was really around, okay, we've got the ECC reference wallet and the SDKs, and they were kind of built around the concept of, you know, a sapling address for the most part, single address. So what's the UX around multiple addresses? Do we auto migrate from sapling to Orchard, or, you know, just work through all that? Well, what came out of that was actually, you know, and what we think is a huge improvement called unified addresses, and that's what we wanted to chat about today. So it's kind of you can think of it as a future-proof Zcash address bundle that reduces UX complexity for users and enables wallets to seamlessly integrate shielded support. So that was one of the big goals. UAs will streamline usability moving forward by creating a simplified address experience and reduce friction in future network upgrades. So in other words, you should be able to add, you know, pool X address into the bundle and kind of have a seamless or graceful upgrade experience, which is what we're after with this, to make it easier and reduce friction. We worked up a requirements proposal that's posted in GitHub, Zcash zips number 470. That's kind of the result of the design sprint work. And then we've kind of iterated on that through a series of meetings to narrow down what UAs are, how it would work in the protocol. And as Dara mentioned, we've got a section in the protocol spec itself to talk about unified addresses kind of at the protocol level.
Do you want me to talk about that, or?
Absolutely, yeah, just hop in.
Okay.
And by the way,
So-
anyone else, because most of the people on this call were involved in the design sprint, and feel free to like add any context and additional thoughts or comments as we work through this. So
yeah. So a unified address is basically a set of addresses for different protocols, and the idea is that you can send this to somebody and they will use whichever is the best address type that they support. So you don't have to know in advance what address type they support. That's the main point of it. So you can have a QR code, for example, that will include both, say, an Orchard address and a sapling address and a T address, and whoever is consuming that that QR code will use the one that they support.
One example where this,
with a preference for shielded addresses.
yeah, one example where this comes up is like, you give Coinbase your Z address now, and they say, "What's that?" With this, they'll be like, "Okay, well, I can't send to your shielded address because Coinbase doesn't support that yet, but I can send to this address because it contains a T address," which they use a little parser which we'll publish, and they'll use the parser to grab the T address out of the blob.
It sort of ends up being another way of, because I sort of independently of this put together the Zcash address crate that we were discussing in the Discord like a couple of weeks ago, which was designed to like a programmatic way for someone to sort of gain automatic parsing support for new address types. This effectively moves it into like the formal address bundle concept. So once someone adds this, obviously if they don't have support for parsing UAs, then they're not going to understand it. But once they add that, then things will just keep working.
Another interesting point is that there's no separate format for orchard addresses. So anything that supports orchards must support UAs, since that's the only way to express an orchard address.
But one
Under
of
the current proposal.
but one of the
yeah.
components of the unified is like, this is the orchard one.
Yes.
So the proposal for the specification is that the bundle is its own encoded type and internally contains typed raw data.
Okay.
Rather than being like a we discussed several other design options, including like just concatenating base32 encoded addresses or whatever, and there are trade-offs considered from like user introspectability of the addresses versus ease of use, or versus like should users just be considering them ephemeral, so on. There's more stuff like that you can look at in the requirements document.
So is there an equivalent standard for viewing keys or spending keys, or is it just designed for payment addresses?
That is what I believe we will need. We've actually just been discussing, because like UAs came out of the wallet design sprint, but obviously like once it hits the core, once it hits the core fan, we have to like figure out how all the rest of it works. The intent would be that we would have an equivalent to a unified viewing key and a unified spending key as well. There was some discussion as to whether it would make sense to be able to have like a single spend authority that links to that enables you to derive the spend authorities for all of the keys involved in the unified address. But at least in my opinion, that's too much of an extra change, because it would require basic completely new derivation trees and things.
So I'm not sure about doing it for viewing keys, because the semantics for a viewing key is that it gives you all of the payments associated with an address, and that's a single address. So you'd have to define what the semantics are of a viewing key bundle. I mean, I guess it would show you all the transactions associated with any of the addresses in the bundle. But
that was the semantics I was thinking. Yeah, like if we're treating a bundle of addresses as equivalent to as equivalent recipients, then it makes sense to me that a viewing key for an address bundle would be a bundle of the viewing keys for the individual addresses.
Deirdre has a hand up.
Yep. Go ahead,
you.
Deirdre.
First thing I think of when someone is given several options to choose from in a cryptographic protocol, as opposed to one, is downgrade attacks. And that includes downgrade attacks as in accidents. Whereas if you have a sapling key, an address, a sapling address, or an orchard address, or whatever, like you either support it or you don't, and you can throw an error that you say you don't support this. But if you give them a bundle and someone does not have the upgraded wallet or whatever, and it says I support sapling and orchard and transparent, and they're like, I don't understand orchard, I'm using sapling, or I don't understand both, I'm using transparent, and you're like, oh, that's not
That's
that
actually kind of the point, though. Actually, is we want them to send to the sapling address if they don't support orchard.
Yeah,
right. But that could be leveraged to say, I quote unquote don't support it, I'm going to use the less secure one.
So this is something that it's up to the recipient, right? So because we have a situation where for protocols that, for example, require a shielded memo, those don't support transparent addresses at all. And so a service like, say, Zec Pages that requires memos to function, and specifically, for some time probably will require sapling addresses to function, they will only be able to provide and have the option to only provide a sapling address in their bundle. So if a recipient is concerned about downgrade attacks, then they should not provide a unified address that permits those.
But if
sorry, just to jump in,
Go
I
ahead.
wouldn't. I think saying if the user is concerned about downgrade attacks, they shouldn't do this is not a good stance. User security should not be up to the user. So I would caution against kind of taking that stance.
So I think
So
that we might be misusing the word downgrade here, because like if someone sends you a payment to your sapling address, that's not less secure than them sending you a payment to your orchard address.
that we know of.
I mean, it could be. So in the context of something like TLS, for example, a downgrade attack is something that happens before you have authenticated the connection. So a man in the middle, for example, can force you to use a lower security option. In this case, if you're sending an address to someone, you're already relying on integrity of that address.
Yeah, good point.
So it's not the same situation. If there's a man in the middle attack, then you're hosed.
Right. That's good.
So you need to send it over.
So there's a difference between downgrade, as in the end user agent chose to downgrade, versus some attacker tricked it into downgrading. Is that what you mean?
So I think the scope for accidental downgrades is quite small here, because there's a rule that you must always use. There's a strict ordering of preference ordering of address types defined in the specification. So it's not like TLS cipher suites, for example, where there's some ambiguity about which is more secure.
But at some level, the situation of a sender choosing to use a less secure one, even if they support a more secure one, is indistinguishable from them just only supporting the less secure one. And so there's a trade-off here between the usability of these addresses, versus versus this issue of do we want at a UX level for this to be a hard error that requires more user interaction to resolve, or do we accept the do we leave it down to the implementations of wallets to do the best thing that we can, and accept that there will be a subset of people who are using wallets who try to do bad things?
So as far as I can tell, or my mental model is that this will end up using shielded addresses more often, because you don't have to know in advance whether your counterparty supports shielded. You just send them an address, a unified address that always contains a shielded address.
Okay,
So you
Zuko and Deirdre have hands.
Yeah,
you wouldn't be sending T addresses in the same situations you do now. Carry on.
Yeah. Deirdre? Yeah,
Oh,
I think
thank
your
you.
hand was up first.
Um,
Go ahead.
I had a previous thought and I'm waiting for it to come back to me. Oh, I remember it. Chris was saying that if you want to strictly limit what you support to make sure that you only get money sent to an orchard address, you can provide an orchard address, not a unified address. Okay, Dara's giving me the thumbs up. That's good to clarify, because I thought that was not supported in this.
So the technical point, it would be a unified address that contains only
I see.
a raw or a shielded address.
Okay, all right. In that case, cool, good. And then my second point is replying to Paku, which is asking for downgrade attacks. Do you refer to the fact that a user could be sending to a transparent address unknowingly when they intended to send shielded Zec instead? And I said, yeah, I do not prefer that. Or now I'm rereading it. I do. Yes, if it is possible, I guess now that Dara has clarified, I think it would be bad if someone sends a bundle of Zec addresses, a unified address, and they quote unquote assume that a orchard or sapling or sprout or whichever supported shielded address in that bundle is not used and it downgrades to transparent. I think that would be bad. But if you can construct an address bundle to your preference and only include shielded and only include the shielded ones that you like, I think that is good, and that alleviates that to somewhat. I think it is crucial, though, that we tailor the UX to be clear about the expectations of what the bundle, address bundle you are creating, what guarantees it is promising.
So yeah, we've had a conversation about that.
Yay,
internally.
Nathan just arrived.
Cool.
Nathan's there. Oh, sorry, I'm cutting off Zuko probably. But I just wanted
Zuko's
to
hand was
rip
up,
off
but
that
go ahead,
point.
Sean. Yeah.
We had a conversation about that internally, where you can create unified addresses, and there's no requirement of what address types, like raw address types, are supposed to be in there. As for the UX of when you create the addresses, I'm not really exactly sure where we're heads at on that, but when you're sending, I'm not really sure where we're at on the UX around sending to an address, and then like, do we tell the user, hey, it's going to send to a transparent address, or the value is going to be published publicly? Are you sure you want to go with it, or prohibit it, or whatever we've figured internally for that? But I think we don't want it to be common for users to want to tailor their address in that way. It should be like a situation that's like Chris was mentioning, one edge case where it's like you need to send a memo, you can't send a memo to a T address. So we don't want it to be common, because if it is, then we are back to the situation where you get an error when you put your shielded address in it, or when you put your address in something and you want someone to send you, but they don't support the protocol yet. We want it to be graceful for users, so that they don't have to think about that, and they don't have to encounter those like annoying error messages. Okay, sorry. Hey, Zuko.
No problem. All right, Zuko. Sorry, I'm going to run through all the hands now. Zuko, you're up.
Well, the main thing I was going to say is, damn, I wish Nathan were here, but then he came in at that moment, because Deirdre was just saying something which I think. So Nathan wrote a GitHub post with like the goals or requirements of the design, and he might even have like slides or something that also describe it. But I think part of the goals of this are kind of the opposite of what Deirdre was just saying about being able to distribute unified addresses that exclude or that are more limited. There's something Nathan wrote in there about how implementations should be discouraged from doing that for a specific reason that I can't remember.
Yeah, I've got the goals on the very next slide, actually, from that same proposal doc.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, so let's see. All right, so Zuko, so Tayor, you're up next.
Oh, Zuko, can you? You put your hand down. It's fine.
So I guess I was wondering, based on this discussion, does the default, it looks like the default is intended to include a transparent address. So I wonder what happens for users who are very concerned about their privacy and never want to get any values to a transparent address at all. Because there don't seem to be any notes in there that say something like, you know, senders or recipients should have an option that says, I only want to ever send shielded or receive shielded. But that seems like a really important feature for particularly cautious users. And I'm also wondering, I think the protocol prevents linkability between shielded addresses, but just, I guess, supplying a number of addresses in a single block means that it's easy to link between them if they've perhaps been listed separately elsewhere. And I don't know how much of a risk that is. I think it would depend on the threat model.
Good point.
So
I have a direct response to that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead with that.
So yeah, I think the intention would be that if you're including both an address type that supports diversified addresses and a transparent address, then it should be a fresh transparent address and a fresh diversifier. And because as you say, if you don't do that, then you have linkability, and even if you ever reuse the same transparent address with sort of two addresses that have different diversifiers, then you've linked them. So you don't want to do that.
All right, Taylor, did that answer your question or comments?
Yes, that's helpful for the linkability aspect. I guess maybe that needs a note somewhere. I guess
it does. I
the
will make a
option of
note to
having
add
shielded,
Okay.
the option of having shielded only addresses in a block as a UX option seems like something really essential. Because I'm assuming the default includes transparent.
Okay. All right. Okay, Geffen, you're up.
Okay, I have a few. So hopefully I'll cover some of what you guys said. The UX that was questioned, our recommendation for most wallet creators would not be that they can choose all the addresses they want, as much as you are going to always share the best that you have and request via that channel, but with the other ones bundled in case whoever you're talking to cannot comply. Transparent addresses might be needed for retail or for exchanges, say, but I believe they would be doing sort of like an exchange might not do a one time, but the retail would be doing basically a request of ZEC that would have more in that QR as well, and it would be a one time T address usage. So you'd be sending from your shielded to their T address to buy a shirt. An old version of software might share a non-UA QR, and you would send from your shielded UA to their old school T still. So we could do a pop-up there in the UX to say, hey, this is going to happen in case you never want to work in T addresses, but it would be allowed currently within the system. And then receiving to a UA via a T would follow a recommendation we have to auto shield that money and rotate your T address. So realistically, if I ever share my my bundle in a QR, sorry, let me not say bundle. If I ever share my UA in a QR and it includes a T address, we would want to rotate that T address as often as possible. We've actually heard both sides of a conversation about why that is necessary or if it actually helps privacy, but it does seem to, if nothing else, make users feel more comfortable.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you, Geffen. Dara, your hand was up next.
Yeah, so we had quite an extensive conversation about whether users should be able to only include shielded addresses, and I had the same view as Deirdre and Tayo, that there would be users who would definitely not want to include T addresses. I'm one of them. But there is another argument about interoperability, which I'm sure Zuko will make that argument.
I'm hoping Nathan will make the argument or whatever. There's a whole lot of really good framing for sort of the positive intention about the benefits of this in terms of the ecosystem and upgrading everyone to strong privacy gracefully with positive UX. But Nathan's the best person, or maybe Geffen or someone's the best person to make that argument.
Nate, you want to talk?
Oh,
sorry, I was muted.
okay.
Yes, you're up next, Nate.
Oh, okay. So I don't know if I'm going to make any argument anyone else wants me to make, but one thing I just wanted to point out. Actually, there's kind of two things. One is there's sort of this standard we're imagining for unified addresses, but then there's also, it's not clear to me yet how prescriptive that standard should be around usability and privacy and security design choices for wallets. But but we should be like as a community figuring out both. And I think one advantage Zcash has right now is that there are just a few shielded wallets, and they're sort of tightly interactive with the Zcash ecosystem. So I'm seeing that spectrum. So like the standard, we might want to make the standard say less and be more conservative about what we require for unified addresses. But then, since there's 3 shielded wallets, we might agree with all of them, hey, let's all try usability in this specific way. Or there might be some variation. So in that context,
the specification is intentionally only providing the minimal information for interoperability. It's not being very prescriptive. And we
yeah, and earlier attempts I was making were much more prescriptive, like wallets must always choose this kind of address before that kind of address in this kind of situation. I think we should figure that out in the ecosystem with real live wallets and real live users, and figuring out what those real live users' needs are. The other piece I wanted to point out was a really important piece for this is, so one of the goals is to streamline users negotiating address types. So then we have these questions of, well, what if a user doesn't want this or that a thing I'm calling a receiver, which is like basically a public key, or what we used to call an address. What if users don't want a transparent receiver? You know, what if they don't want a sapling, but they do want orchard, or vice versa, or whatever? A really important piece here in my mind is that the good UI, so first of all, a good UI always needs to be able to parse any receiver, even if it doesn't know the type, so that we have forwards compatibility. So the next time there's a thing after orchard, we don't have to have a complete new standard. So there's another thing I'm hoping for, which is that there's like clear error messages for the cases where things are like negotiation is wonky. Like I have a wallet that can only send to transparent. Somebody sends me a unified address that only supports orchard. The wallet should be able to say, oh, this only supports orchard and you can't do orchard, so it's not going to work, which would be a great improvement over today, where you post a sapling address into an exchange and it says that's not a valid address. So yeah, okay. Sorry,
no problem.
Zico?
Okay, so I don't have all the the data that Steven's displaying unified address goals. I think that's the more precise idea about what I'm trying to get at, but I'm just going to say very vaguely, I have the general idea that with this approach, with unified addresses is the only way to communicate or encode an orchard address, and then B, the part that's not in the consensus protocols or the spec, but is like getting all the wallets to experiment with doing something that works well with each other. But the overall big vague picture I have is that I think we can make it so that users are getting better privacy and like upgrading to the latest technology, while instead of this being like a cost to them, like a cognitive overhead, and if they do it wrong, it doesn't work, and they whatever, where it's actually at the same time it's simpler, like there's less concepts for the user. And I think a lot of people in ECC have this notion that by making it easier and less cognitively demanding for users to do that, then we can, it might ease the friction of getting everyone to upgrade to shielded addresses and beyond. As we say in this document, there's a lot of other potential uses after Orchard, even beyond like the Zcash blockchain. Hope that made sense.
All right. Nate, you want to pick up and start kind of just going through these bullet points, and I can drive the slides for you?
Sure. Yeah, I'm a little bit discombobulated because I was so late and trying to eat lunch and stuff, but
oh, no problem. Yeah,
I'll
so we
pick up
we
here.
just yeah, Yeah, we went over the introducing UAs, and that was the first slide, the first one that you saw. So.
Okay. Right. So the first goal is to simplify coordination between receivers and senders. So, like today, you might have either that case I just mentioned where you paste your sapling address into an exchange withdrawal website and it says that's not a valid address, or you might have situations where users are like verbally negotiating, like, do you have a shielded address instead of a transparent address? Can you resend that? Or stuff like that I'm imagining may be happening, and we want to simplify that as much as possible. So I would say even in the world where there's like a wallet that has a toggle don't allow, like don't provide T addresses, I still think this is going to help users negotiate that. Like the wallet can help them negotiate what's going on, so the sender will see, oh, the user does not support receiving at a transparent address versus that's not an address, or that's a parser or something like that. So the second goal is so there's this notion that if we can get, there's a class of wallets that don't support the fancy crypto because it's too heavy of a lift or too much complexity, but maybe, or hopefully, they can support unified addresses because of the usability benefits, and maybe it's a smaller lift. Or there's wallets that don't support crypto for like policy reasons, like there may be exchanges, even though I'm kind of skeptical of that kind of storytelling sometimes, but they can still support this format. So so we hope to bridge those parts of the ecosystem. So right now, like if you're using Nighthawk that cannot receive on a T address, there's no way you can interact with an exchange that doesn't provide sapling withdrawal. But in a future world, maybe if Nighthawk provides a UA, even if it doesn't have a T address and the exchange supports UAs, then even if the withdrawal can't occur, the error message will be clear. That's like the worst case, but in the best case, things just work and users don't have to think about which kind of address they need to give to the exchange, potentially.
I mean, I think the reason why Nighthawk doesn't support receiving on T address, it was originally a policy decision, but now it's more of a technical lift, because it's actually quite difficult to support both receiving on T addresses and shielded addresses, because you really have to auto shield to do it properly.
Right, and for however that arose, Nighthawk users can't withdraw from almost any exchange, which severely fragments the ecosystem. So they need to use another wallet. If they're a first-time Zec user, they have to buy the Zec, then they have to use a different wallet, and then they have to switch to the shielded wallet. And we want to try to bridge across as much of that as possible. So the third piece is, again, this thing about, it's sort of, this is more of the philosophical bent, like wallets should help users make the right choices instead of users have to learn some concepts and behave a certain way to get the results that they want. So an example might be, without unified addresses, a wallet user, I think Zec Wallet Lite today, you can produce a T address or a Z address. And so the user has to think to themselves, is it unacceptable for my risk profile to share my T address? Okay, I'll send my Z address to the other person. Then the other person has to figure out, do I support the Z address or not? And then there's might be a conversation. But that first user of Zec Wallet today, if we move to UA, instead, they shouldn't have to figure out how to behave differently. There could be a toggle that says, don't allow, I'm not exactly sure what it says, but like a more privacy toggle or more convenience. There could be a button like that And then their behavior is otherwise mostly the same. Like they still just hand out this thing and they just tell their wallet, I want to be safer or more convenient. That's sort of the vision there. And then there's this other piece where moving forward, we want to enable upgrades. And there's this problem today where if you upgrade and there's a new address format, now you're going to be disconnected from everyone else until they've upgraded. So there's this disincentive to be the first to upgrade. And we want to overcome that. And let's see, and then yes, I'm anticipating there could be more kinds of ways to transfer between users than in the future, either in future protocol upgrades or in ways we're not thinking about that might not require protocol upgrades. So this could be like layer 2 channel stuff, bridging between blockchains, support for different asset, like multi-asset support, or other things. So for example, one example on my mind was we could ship this today and it would have like T-adder receiver support, which is literally just the public key or whatever is necessary to send to a specific transparent address. But then after that, without a protocol upgrade, we could create a new receiver type that's like the BIP32 XPub seed, and there's this new protocol for using one-time use T addresses or whatever to improve privacy. I don't know if that's a good idea, but it's an example of something that could be done once you have UAs without a protocol upgrade. That's much more difficult without UAs. Time check, 40 minutes remaining. So those are goals. Let's go to the next slides. So the next slide is about, I'm not controlling.
1 second, sorry, I was muted.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to catch up in the chat. Looks like we've got, so 40 minutes remaining. I may have to reload these slides, so bear with me. Yeah, so you want to talk about like options next, Nate? I didn't know if you were going to make it or not, so move the slides around a little bit, but I can adjust those.
Oh, let's go to the next slide and I'll roll with it. I mean, in my mind, there are two things. There's next steps, but there's two kinds of next steps. One is figuring out, hey, is this proposal the right kind of proposal and what do the details need to be to standardize on it?
Okay.
There's a second set of decisions about
okay. Yeah, I just want to
what
make
do we do about our
that.
timeline?
Yeah, so I added in a few slides after this one that speak to timeline a little bit, but I'll go ahead and get this one going again, get the presentation going again. Okay, there you go.
Okay. I preferred the other order because the first slide was just like, hey, look, if there's no stress about timelines, we could just figure out, is this a good idea? What should it look like? And then standardize on it.
This one, or sorry, we had a little bit of a last minute shuffle in what we were gonna.
Yeah,
get.
this one. So
okay, let's just go with this one and talk off of it then.
Right. So like I posted a thing to GitHub, which, by the way, if you're from ECC, it's again different from the last requirements doc we had. Partially, I was trying to simplify it, and partially the last doc was super messy, and so I'm not sure I caught everything or any comment, but I just wanted to get the larger community looking at this and talking about it. So if I miss something, you can ping me. So then I wanted to get feedback, especially from wallet vendors or wallet developers and everyone else. And then if it seems like there's momentum and this seems like the right idea and there's not anticipated snags that are like too costly, then I think we could create a zip, standardize on it. And I'm pretty sure the zip will have a minimal footprint on the actual protocol, like the consensus protocol. And so I'm pretty sure it'll be a zip that's mostly about wallet complexity and anything that's parsing these addresses.
I mean, formally addresses, the string form of addresses or the QR code form is not part of the consensus at all. So yeah, it's all completely wallet layer.
Yeah, but just to clarify that point, it's still important to me, I think, that the whole stack is sort of consistently specified. So I would be an advocate of something like this eventually becoming part of the protocol spec.
It is. Addresses
are
are already part of the protocol spec because the protocol spec doesn't just cover consensus.
Yeah, so
yeah.
unified addresses are in the protocol right now, protocol spec, section 5.6 point something. So.
Oh, okay. Great.
Yeah, we got a quick zip. I mean, it's draft, of course, right? Like the whole NU5 spec, but it's in there based on the requirements proposal, which is essentially zip the issue 470 right there.
Yep. So that's sort of that slide. Like, hey,
right,
here's
I'm gonna get back in order then. Okay, so that's the order now. So and then I added a few after that.
So that other slide is sort of the in my mind more of the fun part. If there's questions about that, bring them up. But then this next slide is like, okay, but when should we do this? And because some of us at ECC like the idea of making this a blocking requirement for Orchard. And the rationale is, the rationale is there's this concern that if we ship Orchard sort of in the standard way with what this spec or what these requirements call a legacy address, like we define a new Orchard address type that's just Orchard, and it's, like sapling addresses and sprout addresses and T addresses, and it's a distinct type, and we just keep doing the same thing now and then do UAs in the future. In the interim, there might be more fragmentation and confusion in the ecosystem. I think that's the main driving concern there.
That's certainly my concern.
So because of that driving concern, we want to, like Plan A or Plan B, we like those more. And Plan A is basically try to fit it into try to fit unified address support into NU5. And Plan B is postpone Orchard and unified address support to NU6. And so backing up to Plan A, fitting it into NU5, how complex is that? How much effort is it? How much delay would that cause? Can that fit in the schedule? So on and so forth. So, and then Plan C might be ship Orchard as we were going to do and do UA later. So are there any thoughts or responses to these plans or the motivation or the timeline?
Deirdre has her hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I do agree that it would suck to deploy legacy Orchard addresses and then like within 6 months to a year be like, now we have unified addresses and all of that. That would be annoying. It does feel like I'm trying to turn on my mic a little bit. It does feel like unified addresses kind of just appeared like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
because they kind of did.
I can describe how that
Yeah, it's
happens
because we
a
did
bit.
this design sprint to analyze the user experience of our plan to deploy Orchard. And so the UX, yeah, it came out of that UX discussion. And the UX discussion came like after we had already made all this whole other plan that we've all talked about.
Mm-hmm. So there's that part that it's kind of showed up, not last minute, but it's kind of showed up, but it's proposed. Yeah, so I agree that it would be annoying both as an implementer and as a integrator and a user to be like, yay, Orchard addresses 6 months later, 12 months later, yay, unified addresses. So there's that.
And they solve a concrete problem that we're going to have when we switch to Orchard. We're going to have users being confused as to whether they should give out an Orchard address or a sapling address.
Yeah, I wanted to fill in some detail also about how this came about, because part of it was in conversation in the Arborist calls, hearing the concern of fragmentation of the ecosystem. And so when we were taking that away, we're like, okay, that is concerning. What can be done about it? And then that was happening around the same time as this design sprint. So that's sort of where the idea germinated and we got excited about it.
And can I chime in? Also, the feedback about if we're adding new stuff that fragments the ecosystem by producing new addresses that people have to juggle and choose among, how are we going to ever remove old addresses and defragment the ecosystem? That was a big part of what went into that design sprint too. And so that's where this is coming from in part.
So from what I can tell, the effort, I'm sorry, there's two pieces to the effort. One is like figuring out a specification and creating a zip that everyone believes we should commit to. And then the implementation effort seems to be like wallets are going to bear the brunt of it. So I really would love if there are any wallet devs here for them to speak up. And if they're not here, we need to go get in touch with them about this, because this is a very wallet centric thing. Can we promote any wallet devs who would like to?
We promote Aditya.
Yeah, let's do that.
Aditya Bharadwaj.
Got it. Yep.
We massacred that pronunciation.
Should be rejoining as a panelist. Yeah, I mean, part of the key is if they're going to support Orchard, they have to do something, right? So it's, and in this case, a unified address is an Orchard address. So.
While we wait on that, speaking to the full nodes at least. So I don't believe that this would change much in terms of like Zebra's case. Zebra could confirm, but given that you don't have a wallet right now, I don't think that would really affect Orchard integration for you. On Zcash's side, we do struggle a bit with just the way, like the presumptions, like and assumptions around what RPCs currently do and like how they behave. But we're reasonably confident that we can work around that either by introducing new RPCs that are UA specifically focused, or just carefully extending the existing RPCs and being clear about how UAs affect the assumptions people might be making about what those RPCs do. It's just finding a balance between enabling people who are using existing RPCs to just automatically upgrade like Zec Wallet, or requiring them to do additional work so that we don't break what they're assuming the existing RPCs do.
Okay, Aditya, I think you should be okay now.
Yeah, hey, so for the Nighthawk side, this is the first time I'm learning about unified addresses, and I think that actually solves the issue, because I was beginning to wonder how we are planning to support multiple addresses on the Nighthawk wallet, and knowing that there's going to be like a UA which will simplify the user experience for the users to maybe have some setting to choose which type of address they want to receive to. I think that's going to help a lot.
Well, part of the point is that they don't have to choose, because you could choose to, if you supported receiving on T addresses, then you could just include a T address in the UA. If you only support receiving on sapling and orchard, then that's what you would.
Right. So the bridge portion is taken care of, but the actual balances, where the balance will be received, and will there be 3 different like sub wallets that will hold the balance? I think that portion has to be figured out.
So I think we were anticipating that whenever you received funds on an address that is not the most recent pool, you would auto shield it to the most recent pool.
Okay, yeah,
and there will be functionality going into Libre Zcash that's currently in prototype and draft PR form, but for auto shielding.
Great. I'm looking forward for those ideas and discussing with the ECC team.
So is there anything about the assumptions we're making that seem wrong from your point of view in the user interface?
No, I think the UI is pretty, I think, taken care of. It's more about the underlying functionality of managing and managing the auto shielding and having that processed on a mobile client.
Right, because it's difficult to do asynchronous operations or timed operations on mobile. So, but I guess the just immediately auto shielding helps with that. But what I'm slightly concerned about is, say you receive an IP address and you immediately auto shield, then then that's a timing leak. So you potentially are linking your IP address with the fact that you've received on that address.
There's also, you have the other aspect of, well, if you've given out multiple UAs and with different T addresses, and then you batch your auto shielding, then you're linking those T addresses together anyway. Which, in my view, we should just assume happens anyway. Channels, like people can do wallet bundling things anyway. And again, if you just instead batch them, but then did set a one auto shield per T address, you get the same linkability timing problem. So I'm reluctant to try and solve those issues for transparent addresses when they're inherently transparent, because I don't think there's really a good solution.
I don't think that's
going to eliminate it, rather than just move the problem around.
Okay. All right, very good. Any other hand? Oh, Nate, your hand's up. Okay.
Oh yeah, just following on about auto shielding is one case, and then there's this other case, like if you're sending from sapling to orchard, that's hopping over the turnstile, so that reveals the amount with similar timing information. But the figuring out how to handle that well with wallets is like orthogonal. So we could ship UA and wallets could do something that works that might have known flaws or concerns, and then we can try to improve that as we go. That's one thought there.
I mean, the counter argument is that it's not possible to undo a privacy leak. If you're concerned about an attacker who is just recording everything and trying to correlate it later, then
no. The thing is, we would have to sort out all of the exact same issues around shielding and sending funds across pools, even without UAs.
That's true. Yeah. That's a good point.
So like the wallet has to do something, right? And so UAs aren't directly related to that, but there's a connection in my mind because I see those two kinds of features as having sort of a similar goal where both are trying to just make life easier for the user, but we also have to balance privacy risks and costs there.
Yeah, so the thing is, if you automate a particular behavior, then an adversary can rely on that behavior.
Okay. All right, so we got about just a little over 10 minutes. We've, obviously unified addresses aren't free in terms of additional work over what we were thinking with, call it a raw orchard address. We've made an initial pass. Nate, did you want to talk about any of that today? Kind of what we're thinking in terms of, I threw some slides together if you wanted to cover that as well. I mean, I can do that part, but yeah.
Cover what? Sorry, I was
like,
reading the text.
we've done some work estimating like okay, how much additional work are unified addresses going to be?
Oh yeah,
Within the
can you,
so kind of for plan
can
A,
you talk about it?
basically. Yeah, I've got some slides up
Thanks.
if that's okay. Yeah, I can just pop into those real quick. So for the options from the prior page, plan A, plan B, plan C, the options are, our kind of our first pass is we think it's going to be about 30 additional days effort to implement unified addresses versus raw orchard addresses. It's because again, the timeline so far has been based upon raw orchard addresses. So for option 1, that means you include unified addresses in NU5. That activation timeline gets pushed by 30 days. And by activation timeline, I mean when it activates on testnet, when it activates on mainnet. The audits are already set, so they're proceeding as we discussed last time. And I've got the graphics up after this. We had in the NUP blog post, we'd suggested like a December 1st date for NU6. No content, meaning no one's talked about what might go into NU6, but if you went with 2 per calendar year, you'd be looking roughly at December 1st. If you move NU5 out by 30 days, then you would push NU6 into 2022 at that point, just because you would only have 3 months. So
it's worth pointing out that a hypothetical NU6 on December the 1st would have been very tight anyway.
Right.
And it's possible that we wouldn't have been able to fit very much into an NU6 on that timeline.
But it would make sense if it were like option 2, because we would have much of that work done already.
Right.
Right.
So kind of a data point on option 2, which is you postpone orchard and unified addresses and put those in NU6. That's not as simple as, oh, okay, let's just shift gears and not do it, and we'll concentrate on what we're doing in NU5. The delta. There's actually some additional work to kind of, okay, not do orchard at this point. So we would kind of take a hit there to strip out some things, for lack of a better term. And then, so I added like non-option 3. That's personal. It's still an option, of course, but that's ship orchard with legacy addresses. But I think that creates a legacy address being 01 asterisk. And then UAs later, but as Deirdre pointed out, I think that's just pretty messy. So so those were the kind of
I don't like option 2 either.
So then if we look at the timeline, so this was the original timeline we had. Testnet activation May 1st, mainnet activation August 1st. Shifting the activation timelines, you're looking at testnet activation June 1st and mainnet September 1st. All the other timings, again, stay the same, like the implementation audits, etc.
So this is for option A.
This would be option A, right? Yeah.
This, by the way, means that we have more time for mitigation if the audits do find anything.
Right.
I just sorry. What was option A again?
Option A is you basically just push the NU5 activation timeline by approximately 30 days.
So that's testnet and mainnet, right?
Yes, yeah, that's both. So testnet would activate, so this is original, testnet May 1st, mainnet August 1st, pushing it 30 days, you'd have testnet June 1st, mainnet September 1st.
I mean, I like the fact that testnet activation becomes after the NTC implementation audit.
Yeah, and
that's an improvement, actually.
And that's, I just noticed this implementation audit block in gold, I messed it up when I recreated this graphic. So it should still be the month of May time period. It got shifted, I think, automatically somehow. But that's that. So, and then looking at NU6, kind of the original timeline was, and again, just including it in the calendar year, December 1st, mainnet activation, and working backwards, kind of feature selection would occur even before or NU5 activated. So as Strad was pointing out, that's a pretty short window for what would go into NU6 potentially.
I think we'll be so distracted by NU5 that we won't be able to propose anything for NU6 on that timeline.
Yeah. So if we look at, okay, what if we just went 6 months from, you know, an updated NU5 of September 1st. If we go 6 months out, then you're looking at mainnet activation roughly March 1st, 2022. You know, feature selection roughly in the month of October. So definitely a little more breathing room in there.
I like this time.
Yeah, so that's the graphics. That's kind of the options based on our initial assessment of the work. So sorry, I haven't been able to keep up with hands or comments or, okay, so Nate, your hand's up. Looks like first, if I'm looking at the order.
But it was just gonna be to ask if people thought of other alternatives or options, and then also to get like a temp check of how people feel about the options, including wallet devs.
Okay, so all right, Deirdre. Your
Sort
hand
of
was up next, I think.
Sort of on options or other options or whatever. So one thing that I noticed for Orchard when the spec was finalized is that it didn't include the recursive Halo proofs. It includes all the pieces you need to do recursive proofs, but it does not include the recursive proofs. So it's more or less a sapling clone that enables us to do the recursive proofs later. That is eliding a lot of details, which are not fair, but you know, what value is delivered in Orchard currently specified that would deploy an NU5 whenever NU5 goes out the door. And it's like, it's setting up for recursive proofs.
Right. Well, a huge thing is it eliminates the need for trusted setup, and then it makes, therefore, future circuit changes easier, right? So you don't have to do another multi-party setup to do a circuit change. So that's a huge one.
But
so in my opinion, NU5 or Orchard is the right amount to chew off in a single upgrade. I would be very reluctant to chew off more in a single upgrade.
That was going to be my contra proposal, which is like, well, if Orchard gets deployed later, would that make us more amenable to actually deploying recursive proofs with it or not?
It wouldn't. I would never advocate.
I don't think so.
The recursion and then also that at the same time, no matter what. Yeah, because that is just way too much to have audited. Way too much surface area for security bugs. Yeah, that's just, we can't do that.
Okay.
Dodger,
I agree with Sean.
You were next, Dodger.
How confident are we in that estimate of 30 days?
Pretty high degree of confidence. I feel pretty good. We've spent. I think we've been working toward that estimate for a couple weeks as we refine more what we thought UAs actually meant and what was entailed in adding support. And we kind of made an additional hard push when we finalized the requirements proposal that we were coming up with. So I would say a high degree of confidence in that.
And then after that, we padded it to a month for what it's worth.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're pretty confident with that number, the 30 days additional work.
I'm completely confident.
Yeah. Like the main blocker in terms of core team's time on this is the necessary changes inside Zcash D for unified addresses, and we're reasonably confident at this point that we can scope those appropriately so that they don't interfere with the beyond this time frame with rolling Orchard out. Obviously, the changes that happen to like the mobile SDKs and things can be parallelized relative to the Orchard work that's happening in core.
Right. Tayor, and am I saying, is it Tior or Tayor? I'm so sorry. I don't want to.
I don't really mind.
Okay, all right.
I type it much more than I write it. So I just wanted to clarify, it seems like you've done a lot of detailed work on option 1, and that's your favorite alternative. But just when evaluating option 2, what is actually being pushed to NU6? Is it, are you pushing the version 5 transaction format and transaction identifier non-malleability to NU6? Or are they staying in NU5?
They would stay in NU5.
Yes.
So the
Right.
only
So-
piece that we separated out is Orchard itself. You would still have the NU5 transaction format. You would still have non-malleability, because those changes themselves are still concretely useful, and the sooner we get them in, the better.
But the
Sure,
version
so-
5 transaction format, doesn't it contain orchard fields?
Yeah, so that
It
would
does,
be
but it's
one of the
optional.
pieces that's one of the pieces of work that would need to happen, is to
Right.
reduce the scope of that to be focused on the non-malleability changes rather than
Okay.
including
Yeah.
Orchard. And then there would be another transaction format proposed for NU6 that then added Orchard.
I see.
Right. Okay.
Which would happen to be
Thanks. Those were my next questions. Was is there another transaction format? And so just to make it really clear, then if we were to add user-defined assets, that would require a version 7 transaction format, possibly. So just making it clear that if we go with option 2, we'll end up with possibly one more transaction format than we would previously.
Well, so I don't know. There's a possibility that we could include UAs and UDAs in U6, because we would have more time.
Sure.
Yeah.
There's also, a given that we have the design of the Orchard transaction format well specified, it would also be possible for us to release the transaction non-malleability change with the Orchard fields as part of the transaction format, but just without the consensus rules enabled for, and just have those fields disallowed in terms of the consensus rules until NU6 activates them. So we could still do it with one transaction format update, because that parsing is relatively trivial.
All right. Anything else, Taylor, before I move on?
No, I just wanted to clarify option 2.
Okay. Nate, your hand was up next, and just a time check for everyone. We're kind of coming up on time right now.
Yeah, so I had a question, but then I realized I'm gonna steal Deirdre's, I'm gonna lump it with Deirdre's question. So her question is this a zip, and aren't we past the zip proposal deadline for NU5? And my question was similar. It was, doesn't UA deserve its own round of audits, or it needs to be audited probably by security auditors?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So Bam Bam, you want to
Yeah,
answer
so
that part?
in retrospect from previous bugs, we decided that basically every loose zip that happens between network upgrade should be included in the next network upgrade assessment. So this one, if we're thinking about it as something that's ready for NU5, then it would have been a loose zip. So I'm going to talk to the vendor and see if we can tag some days on for it. Basically.
I mean, so the version of the spec that is being audited at the moment does include UAs, or it includes a specification which is not necessarily final for UAs.
I think that might be two things there. Firstly, that it wasn't there when we got them to scope the job, and secondly, I'm not sure that's a faithful representation of what's really happening. They have that available to them, yes, but they're actually assessing a previous version. Like they generally
no, it was already in that version.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, I got it in before the start of the
Okay, but after the scoping, so I'm still going to have a word.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. To be fair to them.
Yeah. So okay. I'm not sure that answered. Nate, did you still have a comment? Sorry, your hand was up.
Well, I kind of also wanted to slip in a thought about Deirdre's question. So I would say in an ideal world, I would want this to be a zip that's part of NU5 feature selection. And I also think we have precedent in the past where like zips that were dependencies of things we had already committed to or sometimes we might split apart zips, or I think we've done some of that kind of stuff after like the zip proposal deadline. And I feel like this would fit in that sort of murky gray area. There's another perspective, which is that, well, this doesn't really touch consensus protocol. It's just like a wallet standard. So it could be done on a different timeline. I kind of see that argument, but I don't think, I mean, if we did do that, like that whole timeline needs a lot of the same like benefits and like checks and balances that the NUP is giving us in the first place. Like we would still want like zip review and like clear decision making about when we would commit to it as a community and when things should activate. And so, and then there's this third option of if we postponed it to NU6, then that clarifies things from in a lot of ways, because then it could just go into the feature selection process of that, and there wouldn't be this ambiguity about it being past this deadline and things like that.
So
that's sort of
I have one comment there, and then Dara's got her hand up. I get all that. So I would come down on it's not it doesn't affect protocol like consensus level code. The NUP's historically been for consensus level code. An example, kind of zip 313, right? Reduce the standard fee. That was done, discussed. Wallet vendors were primarily affected. A large group agreed, oh, this is the right thing to do, as well as homes at Zbay, which arguably, not necessarily a wallet in that sense. But there's also, you could take some of the ideals of the NUP and apply it to arguably every zip. But I would hate for, being dogmatic about the NUP and feature selection to force us into like option 3, which is not a good choice, just so we can say we dotted a particular I or crossed a particular T. So that's just my comment. Dara, you're next.
Yeah, I was going to say basically the same thing. I mean, the NUP is supposed to be a guideline. It's supposed to help us to do things on time.
It is in a multi-implementer environment for a protocol. I thought it was not a guideline. It was something more.
So I mean, ZebRD doesn't have a wallet, so it's not affected by this at all.
Okay.
So that isn't really an argument for.
Well, no, it's more about dropping things in to change the plan for NU5 for a multi-implementer protocol that we're trying to integrate with you. So.
Yeah, right. That's why we're telling you about it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair to say that Zebra doesn't have a wallet, because we are working on Orchard, and this is about when the Orchard deadline will be. So while we're not affected by,
I mean, the addresses are part of the Orchard protocol, so not disputing.
But also, I think the decision, like the conversation and decision-making process about consensus aren't predicated on like the amount of effort required by all of the participants, right? Like, right? Like I mean, it's something to consider, but it's not like a reason to weigh people's input differently in my mind.
Bam Bam, I want to get to the hands that are up, and then we should probably wrap the call up at that point.
Tough act to follow, especially as the hand was really up for something that was happening somewhat before. I guess what I wanted to speak to was in defense of, I'm going to put my hand down before my arm gets tired. In defense of the plan to perhaps build some consensus around some social consensus, some economic, some ecosystem consensus around features that we could all agree on, but without having to agree on them for the purposes of consensus, right? Of network consensus. So now the NUP has got these fixed deadlines so that we can definitely deliver. We don't diverge on network consensus because that is a catastrophe. But it's a very big hammer, and it seems like making all changes using that big hammer perhaps isn't. Basically, if you just because you happen to be making changes already doesn't mean that that's the best time to do all changes. I guess what I'm trying to say is if you're trying to do something that's less dangerous, maybe don't pick the time when you're already busy doing the most dangerous things to do that. So from a security point of view, I think it's there's a big it seems like the advantage of having this pipeline that we already build consensus among us is somewhat outweighed by the fact that we're using that to do this incredible heart surgery that if it goes wrong, we all die. Right.
Okay. Good point, Bam. Taylor.
So yeah, I think before the foundation engineers knew about these new features, we'd already had a discussion internally about our position on a delay. And so I think in general, we are very open to delays to NU5 or delays to Orchard. I just would like to clarify when we need to decide, because given that wallet developers and others are affected by these changes, it might be helpful to maybe take a week or so to have some longer conversations and build consensus in the community.
I like that. Sounds good. Yeah, definitely.
Maybe set up a meeting with the wallets, because there are wallet developers who weren't here because I guess they didn't know that this was coming. It was going to be announced.
Right, because it's consensus people that are here, not wallet people.
Right.
Let's see. Okay. Is just quiet. But yeah, there are others who are not here.
Man, let's see. I totally lost my window. Actually, I can stop sharing, I think, at this point. Okay, so it looks like Geffen, your hand's up next.
Yes, so the idea did come into existence about 3 weeks ago. The earliest we could have shared it would have been about a week ago, but we were doing our own due diligence to make sure we weren't coming up with something that was not going to be able to work. So we do apologize for that. But I do want to mention that I think this is one of those situations where pivots are necessary. This is a good pivot time because it's a good enough product change to make a real dent in the user population and adoption. So that's all.
Cool. All right, I think that's all the hands. Nope, Nate.
Well, my hand was, let's be clear about what next steps would need to be about unified addresses specifically before we go here. So like maybe a decision date, or I love the idea of planning a meeting with wallet developers if we can get that organized. I'm not sure if we can get that organized soon, quickly.
We can, I think. Brad, what do you think? You're still on the call?
Timeline of a week to just kind of come together and rally up.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, we could host a meeting with, like, in the slot next week.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've already had some conversations with other wallet developers. Like, I don't want to share like things shared in private conversations.
Yeah.
Here. But like generally the sentiment is positive, and that it kind of echoes what Paku said a few minutes ago, where implementation and support of this is easier than trying to support a proliferation of addresses in a single wallet. So it's like this is kind of fixing a problem, not creating more. So people are generally in favor.
All right, sounds good. So we'll do that. That's the next step, and then we can obviously, async, right? Like R&D Discord, keep up, talk about it, iterate on it, whatever. And then the GitHub issue, which is linked out there. Dodger, you have a physical hand up. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. This slot next week is the Easter Friday. If you are in a time zone that is
you're right.
Close to, yeah.
That's an excellent point. Okay, well, we'll just use like maybe the call planning channel in Discord to kind of figure a time that works well. And maybe we do it like the following Monday or something like that, or whatever. But we'll figure that part out. Okay, so Dara, your hand, you have a you have your hand up in the chat, and I think I saw Dodger's hand up actually, like either that or waving goodbye. So Dare, go ahead.
So Tara asked, is there a deadline by which we need to make a decision? I think there should be a deadline. I don't know what it needs to be. So if we're having the discussion with wallet developers in a week, then maybe 2 weeks.
Well, why don't we, do you want to just say the next Arborist call? And
I think it needs to be earlier than that, because under
okay.
the current
that's true too.
Under the current process, we need to have the test activation height picked in about 2 weeks.
Oh, okay, right. So we basically need to make a decision on that call with the wallet devs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's try to do as much as we can with them async, and so,
yeah,
and then make that call, discuss, and decide.
Okay. Dodger.
Is option 3 really a non-option?
I mean, yeah, maybe we can eliminate some of the options here. I would like to eliminate option 3. Is there any dissent to that?
Remind me which one 3 was?
3 is ship with raw orchard addresses in NU5 and then add UAs later on down the road.
Yeah, I think that's safer. Nathan just said he had, just case in point, like on the chat in this call, Nathan just said he hasn't been working on the pool deprecation lifecycle, pool lifecycle work as a result of concern about UAs.
Right. That's partially because I thought I just judged UAs have a better impact for adoption.
Right. I mean, it just changes this late in a thing that we've already laid out as having deadlines by this particular point are often like a distraction that can cause problems. This is a critical, difficult upgrade.
We have one person who wants to retain option 3 for consideration, so it stays.
Can I ask though, Bam Bam, why would you advocate for option 3 or C? I'm getting super confused. The third one over the middle one, which is postpone orchard and UAs together.
Because there's no reason, there's no need for us to coincide the availability of this feature to users with its availability on the network. There's no intrinsic link between those two things.
I disagree with that position because it affects users insofar as if they begin using bare orchard addresses, then the wallet developers are still forced to cope with all of the implications of having bare orchard addresses.
You're assuming that we provide them with an SDK that can accept orchard at that time.
Well, we have to if we're deploying orchard on the network, right? We don't want to deploy something.
Sorry, are you saying that the consensus rules of the network are dependent on the availability of SDKs for download?
No, but we need for test. Typically, we want features to be testable on testnet. That's the point of having testnet activation before mainnet activation. So if it isn't testable on testnet, then that's less safe.
Things cease to be testable on testnet after mainnet activates?
No.
But the point is, I thought that option C was to allow bare orchard addresses. So by assumption, people would be using the bare orchard addresses immediately.
You can just limit the amount of people that are actually using them until the full UA is available.
That seems like a strange approach to me.
I'm talking about uncoupling product from protocol upgrades.
I think the argument in favor of option 2 is that if you're gonna, you might as well delay everything instead of deploying orchard with the orchard addresses, because then you're saving wallet developers a ton of slightly risky work implementing those addresses and stuff. So if you're comparing ship everything together or ship everything without all of the wallet stuff and the new addresses, yeah, I think option 2 is the safest. Option 3 is kind of a middle ground where people don't get some users won't be able to access Orchard, and option 1 is the riskiest and most complete, where users get everything.
So from the point of view of improved anonymity sets, we want people to switch over to using Orchard in as short a time as possible.
Right, but that doesn't
because
have
if
the time offset between that happening and the network upgrade activating on the mainnet could be any arbitrary time that we decide on.
I don't see the point of delaying the actual usage of Orchard until after the activation. To be honest.
I think if we delay the usage, we should actually delay the activation, because that gives us more time to make it the actual protocol activation safer.
So I mean, there's something I'm hearing here that, like, so if we took option 2, delayed everything, it would totally make sense to me that we would want to stand up an Orchard testnet as soon as, like, if the Orchard testnet's still ready, even without UAs around the same target date we currently have, it'd be great to set that up, and then we would have a long time to like prototype UAs and test them on it before the feature activated.
I mean, to be honest, I don't know why we're even talking about options B and C, because 30 days delay is perfectly sufficient for option A.
Yeah, and I think there's one thing that, one motivation I have that I don't hear called out much, because I think engineers and security people rightly value slowing down to be safe, but going quickly to stay relevant in the marketplace is also important, and we gotta balance those.
So Deirdre, I think you said for Zcash D, do you anticipate the work for ZebraD to take longer than 30 days to not support raw Orchard addresses versus unified addresses?
Well, not even just Zcash D versus Zebra, but like anyone that is going to support something that is a fundamentally different abstraction of how you interact with sending money around than the legacy address type, which was dreamed up in a UX design sprint a couple of weeks ago.
And by the way, we had external wallet developers participate in that design sprint as well. So,
yeah, like I think this is a good idea, like full stop, but it is a paradigm shift, and I'm using that's a bloated word, but it is a shift in abstraction and how the end user, where the end user can be a wallet user or the wallet developer, about how you address money on the network. It's no longer a sapling or a transparent or an Orchard legacy address as we're used to, or that Bitcoin people are used to. It is now a bundle, which I can totally understand the value of it and all the stuff that Zuko said. But it is new enough and different enough that I would, one, in implementation wise, I'd be willing to give it time, but also in terms of sort of like adoption wise and sort of community wise, like this is a new, different thing. Giving it a little bit of time to breathe, even if Zcash D as a wallet implementer and Zebra as a non-wallet implementer at present, we're just a consensus implementer and verifier. Even if they could get it done in 30 days plus minus. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Right, got you. Okay. So we're about 15 minutes over, and we still have hands up. So I don't necessarily
really
mind. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted.
Oh, we lost you there.
Yourself, Bob.
Oh, just wanted to defend myself a little bit there. I want us to take on significant amounts of risk. Small org, small project, want to eat the world, and we are taking on a fantastic amount of risk. NU5 already is a massive upgrade, and we're shooting ahead. What I don't want us to do is like just add on compound risks on top of what is already a big risk. So I think we should take on lots and lots of risk. We are doing that. What I'm trying to say is I think this might be a bridge too far.
Okay.
I think my assessment of the risk is relatively small.
Well, that was yeah, okay. Let's just draw a line under it right there. I would tend to come down kind of on that side as well. Okay, so we'll follow up with wallet vendors, figure out a time when we can meet. We can continue conversation async and the Discord R&D. And if that sounds okay, we'll kind of put a bow on this call.
And then we'll come
So
back
just to be clear, all the options are
Thanks,
still on the
everyone.
table.
Yes.
It's a really good call. Thanks, everyone.
Yep. Thanks,
All
everyone.
right, thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers.
See you on Discord.
See you.